Tony,
Here.
James,
Here.
Brian,
Here.
Debbie, here, Dave,
Here.
Michael,
Here.
Aubrey. Here. I make a motion to enter executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056B to discuss a student issue at 6:30 p.m. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Motion carries. You're back. Return from executive session at 7:12 p.m. I make a motion to deny the student appeal. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Motion carries. Next.
For
Post. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. Motion still carries. For agenda adjustments, I had 3. I want to remove the executive session under item 8, so strike that. I wanted to add under item 5, have a G. I wanted to talk about the February 3rd meeting and the next finance meeting. And under 5, E, what? Yeah, new business. Yeah, I was under new business for both, sorry. Is that 5 or is that 10? 10. Thank you. My Roman numerals.
Italian, so I know.
It's all good. Number B2, move to approve the first reading to rescind. I want to add ILA student assessment back in only because we need to carry it forward. I understand that maybe we'll have a motion on that, but just where everything was tabled, I want to keep it clean and bring it all forward. So I have those 3 adjustments. Is there any
What was
other?
the second adjustment?
Second adjustment was under item 10, thank you, Brian. G, I wanted it to be the February 3rd meeting. I wanted to talk about as a committee briefly and the next finance meeting. Did we have any other agenda adjustments? Is there a second on those adjustments?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Motion carries. ILA student assessment. I just want it brought forward since the other ones were tabled.
For the first or second?
So, the motion as a second.
Next, I make a motion to approve the meetings of the regular meeting December 9th and special meeting December 16th. Do I have a second? Any discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. Next, we have a presentation from Mr. Adams, a key point presentation.
Hi, I'm Abby Guan, president of Keywood, and I'm Taylor Scripture, and I'm the vice president of our Keywood. So our first event this year was our 3rd annual Cancer Walk. It was on October 13th, which is National Breast Cancer Awareness Day, so we all wore pink. And because of this, the Breast Cancer Research Foundation actually matched what we raised. We raised $482, and after they doubled it, it was $964. We had it at Bangalore City Forest. The next event we had was back in October. It was Helier, and it's at Camp Sunshine down in Casco, Maine. This was an event where most of our members went. There was 13 in total, from there. And this was a great weekend of team building, learning leadership skills, and doing community service. Yeah. And we had 2 facilitators actually who got to basically oversee the weekend and help out where they were needed and build that leadership. So this is the second year we participated in the trunk or treat here at the high school. And the first year we had like around 6 members and 3 parking spots. This year we were planning on that again, so we had 26 members, but we put them all into 1 parking spot. We were all dressed up, yeah. It was a lot. A bunch of high schoolers dressed up and yeah, smushed together. But we gave a ton of candy to all the kids. We painted faces, played bean bags, and raised money for youth. It was great. The next event is the fall community cleanup. We We had 15 members in total at this event. It was about 3 at every house. We had 5 houses throughout Louisiana, Carmel, and Hermon. They basically called and asked whatever the community needed. They raked leaves, they picked weeds, they did all that. And everyone who went said it was a great time.
We're planning to do it again in the spring. And then right before Thanksgiving, we helped Neighbors Supporting Neighbors Food Pantry, which we do a lot with a food drive down at Danforth's. We spent about 5 hours on the weekend. It was very cold, but we got a ton of food for families in need right before the holiday. And we also raised $675 at this event, so it was very successful. And just some recent things we've done. We sponsored the foster families gifts for the holidays. And we did bell ringing for Salvation Army at Sam's Club. We also put together gift bags for all the teachers in our school. We set up the charity tree, which is still in the library, and it had tags on it for anyone in our school to purchase gifts for those in need, again, through Neighbors Supporting Neighbors Food Pantry. And then the last thing we did was the week right before break, we went to the Bangor Humane Society and did some volunteering, and then took some tags off their tree and sponsored gifts for the animals. Yeah, that's it.
Could you tell them a little about
Oh, yeah.
in case they don't know? I don't mean for you guys all, but just in case they don't know what it is. I think it's probably good to hear what you do.
It's just a club here at the high school. Anyone can join. We our goals are helping the community in any way we can, serving others. Yeah, we have a lot of members right now, so it's nice.
How many students are involved in the club at this time?
Right now we have 66 members, dues paying members. There's like over 100 in our Google Classroom, and around 50 show up to every meeting.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Awesome.
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I just want to recognize you guys because I am involved through my Kiwanis, but the size of the Hermon Key Club is no joke, and Mr. Adams, I really commend you for working with the students and growing that program. So thank you for all your hard work there and leadership, and hats off to the students because I know you guys are now partnering together with the Builders Club at the middle school, and it's really exciting for you guys to be able to be leaders and little mentors with them. So thank you guys very much for your involvement. I appreciate it greatly.
Thank you to the school board for giving several Kiwanis for sponsoring.
Yes, we sponsor them, and they are all so impressed. These guys came, and these individuals came and ran our meeting at Kiwanis, and this was all, mind you, while Mr. Adams was not there. So I attended meetings on a Wednesday morning, and you would have thought he was sitting there. I had to look, and he wasn't, but they still ran it like a group of professionals, so hats off to you guys. Next up is committee acknowledgements. So I know that we had 2 public comments from last time. Thank you from Mr. Walker and Ms. Dern for working with Danielle Haggerty in getting the answers that she needs. I know you guys are still working out some, so thank you very much for working on that. And the second one was Mike Haggerty had presented that there was a need for middle school cheerleading uniforms. And so thank you to everybody that worked out a solution to be able to have those cheerleaders be using new to them, hand-me-down from the high school uniforms, but it's my understanding that they're very excited about that, and I believe it's in the budget for the next year. The only thing I would ask, Mr. Walker, if you could just double check and make sure that all other uniforms are up to par, because we certainly don't want any students uncomfortable in any. So next I'm going to, so I don't forget the students, I'm going to turn over to Michael for acknowledgements.
So the high school is having its Poetry Out Loud competition this Thursday, and our National Art Society is starting its book drive on the 20th to donate all books to the Literacy Volunteers of America.
Student Council held the first ever casual dance in over a decade, which was super exciting. It gave students opportunities outside of school to have fun and foster connections with those around them. Key Club's District Educational Conference will be held at the beginning of April this year in Portland for the first time ever. It's going to be super fun, and And we're preparing all of our stuff for our Key Clubs contest, hopefully bring home some awards. And our class officers and advisors will begin preparation for the annual golf tournament, which is one of our biggest fundraisers to help pay for prom and all those costs.
Excellent, thank you guys. Ryan?
I just want to welcome Mr. Walker and joining our group. Appreciate your willingness to work with us and keep this doing.
Let's hope that Mrs. Durham is enjoying the sunshine.
And maybe tuning in, right?
I wanted to just comment on show choir. Hands and band did a phenomenal job. Show choir presented here too. I appreciate that. I attended the Pans and Band and they just did a fantastic job. I just absolutely love that. So it's a great program. And then Pat, I just wanted to comment on the reading program and to see the success and you guys are following through that and to see the growth in those young kids. That's an area that we need to improve. So thank you for being proactive with that.
All set.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to have students come and present to us. We have student reps that give us the opportunity to know the things that are going on, but for the different groups and different organizations to come and actually present to us kind of adds to what our student reps bring. So thank you for that.
They scooted up before I got the chance, but thank you to the Key Club members for presenting to pass it on to them. That is amazing, the array of organizations they're supporting. That is more than most people support in their entire lives, and they've done it in the semester, I assume, right? That's unbelievable, so that's really cool, thank you.
All right, next we will move to public comment, and I'd like to welcome Danielle Haggerty.
Thank you. Danielle Haggerty, Barber of Hermon. I just wanted to follow up on last month's public comments, which I appreciate Mrs. Dunn and Mr. Walker for getting back to me. And I already provided this information to Mr. Walker and to Stephanie, Mrs. Euler. I looked at the financials and just the background. I've been involved in the school's budget for the last 2 years, and last year we had really done a few things differently in addition to them doing a zero-based budgeting where they build up their budget. In addition to that, we compared it to operational and capital expenditures, and quite honestly, the group of us really pushed hard because it seemed like we needed recalibration because we had a trend of year over year over year, the unassigned fund growing, and the unassigned fund was above what statute wants it to be. So that was one of the things that we really pushed back on. Last month I came and I said this seemed really unusual that there was a June expenditure, I'm going to round, I don't normally round, but I'm going to round, of $3.8 million. And normally the expenditures average 1.3 million. And also in May's it was 1.3 million as well. So it seemed like a huge outlier, and I was curious the reason for that. I was given some great answers. One was the accrual process or journal entry process for the July and August salaries, which was $1.9 million. And then the other item was K-12 expenditures on one-time wants that the schools had because they saw that there was more money in the budget to be spent. And so they were advised to go ahead and spend, they were advised, principals were advised to go ahead and spend it, and they did as they were told. Even with that $150,000 unbudgeted expenditures that took place in the month of June, which I'm not questioning them, I'm sure they were good expenditures, and that's not really the point that I have. There's still $430,000 between what is normally spent, what was spent in May, and what was actually spent in June. So if you take the 3.8 million, you remove the 1.3 million, you remove the 1.9 million, you remove the 150,000, and if you had all whole numbers, not what I'm giving you, it would come out to about I would come out to $430,000 approximately. So I'm just curious what other items might be there. The reason why I ask this is not to be a pain in the ass or not to think that anybody here, sorry, or not to think that anybody here spent anything on something that shouldn't have been spent on. The reason why I'm asking is because last year was a recalibration year. And how we knew we needed to recalibrate is we had a solid understanding of what was operational and what was capital, and so that's why I'm asking it, so we have a solid understanding of what's operational, what was spent because we have extra money, and what is capital.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will have Mr. Walker reply back to you and just ask that you CC the entire committee. We don't expect you to have an answer right now on your first day.
Thank you.
Next up, Ed Ford.
Union folks at 4 and Union Street. Stick with the budget theme tonight. I'd be curious to see what, maybe we could just get a primer of where the school board is and they use and how they use the entire reserve fund. I know we've probably gone through that over the years, but it'd be nice to know kind of just how that's used, if there are rules or any policies in place, you know, that guide those, or maybe it's just at the pleasure of the school board. So it'd be interesting to know. And I'm interested in the enrollment stabilization reserve. I think that's been you know, explained before. I just maybe an update on what that is. Number two, somewhere, I think it was last year, the cost center summary budget format has changed, and it removed career and technical education. And I remember there was a reason why that was removed. I'd like to see, I just think that needs to get put back in there. That state statute, when you're making when your summary, where your budget format, that is one of the rules that state statute says shall be in there. And number two, the Hermon, we just had a referendum where we put a lot of money into that project here, the career and technical education. So it might be nice to put that back in there. And back in here, tonight's agenda, new business E talks about the transfer of 5% from one cost center to the other. And it'd be interested to know maybe a little inside baseball of what the school board goes through when they transfer that. How do they choose what money that comes from and what it goes into? And there's probably a simple explanation for that, but I wonder if you might be able to just explain what that is. So those are my 3 items. Thank you.
Thank you. David, I would just ask that you guys follow up the same process for Danielle, please. Next up, personnel, resignations. Sierra Tolman. And then next up, I have a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation to employ Michelle Ludick. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
The resignation, is this filling the resignation position? Yes.
Any abstentions? Okay, and because it's Pat's?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. Next, this is a volunteer position, so thank you for listing the volunteer of Marissa Kelly. Next, we have excused absence of school committee members, and I don't believe that we had any. Oh, that was the only business. I'd like to open it back up to public comment for new business that's listed.
Danielle Haggerty Hermon again. I just had, and I'm sure you're going to go into this, capital improvement. I'm very excited to see this on here because I think it's important. We have some capital needs through all the schools, and just hopefully we're starting to do a long-term plan on that. And so I want to give kudos for that. Secondly, I noticed that transfer of funds is on here. It seems unusual that that's on here in January, so I'm hoping you guys will elaborate on why transfer of funds is on in January instead of the end of the school year when we know what needs to take place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? We'll close public comment. Next, we'll turn to the capital improvement plan. Okay. And it's on the agenda, so
typically last year and the year before, we've worked at a capital improvement plan in a subcommittee with the facilities and the finance. I know we're in the transition of superintendent, so it's a little discombobulated of what direction we're going in, but as we develop the budget, I think it's important that we look at capital improvement projects that we had planned or worked on, or how that looks, and I'm not sure, it sounds like this.
Yeah, I mean, I've come across information around the labs, science lab in high schools. These were communication between Superintendent Byrne and the town around the track and turf field and the long-term plan for, those are very expensive projects. So usually you try to break that down over a 10-year lifespan. How much should we be putting away in a reserve fund so that when we reach the end of that lifespan, we can afford to replace it, those kinds of things. So it sort of goes hand in hand with the budget process that we're just getting rolling with.
So I'm not sure, when I looked through the notes of last year, we met with all the principals and we got a list of things that they need to have done for projects in the building. One of those was the science lab, which has been ongoing since roughly 2019 or so. I did reach out to the town to ask them about the reserve because that was on the ballot, the warrant articles for June. And there was some confusion in the reply to Mrs. Haggerty surrounding that. So I provided some updates on that. When I checked with the town today, or yesterday, they said that they had changed the reserve fund and retitled it for the science lab, but there was $0 placed in there. So I'm a little confused about that.
I guess I would defer this item back for the next meeting to allow David to be able to have the appropriate time to report back to it with the administrators. I wasn't expecting that it would be something that we as a committee were commenting on. I was expecting it to be.
Well, when I tried to talk with it about the facilities committee, there was frustration of what exactly are we doing and where we're going. So I'm trying to figure out, as a curriculum or subcommittees, are we being part of that like we were before? For facilities and the finance working together with the principals of what projects are priority.
What did you guys talk about at your last facilities meeting?
Well, there was some resistance there, so I guess we talked about, the positive was the science lab upstairs.
I keep on hearing mention of a science lab, and I guess I would ask, is our science lab that we have up to code? If not, what improvements need to be made? And what is the cost of this science lab that keep on
So
hearing
there's an
about?
engineering study being done right now.
Okay. Because it was my understanding that money was to be set aside if it was available. Obviously, my biggest concern is that everything is up to code and safety. But beyond that, I guess I would turn to the administration as to what it is that they were looking for. So I'd like to have the capital improvements come back for the next agenda to allow David the appropriate time to research it.
I mean, also, there's a book on, the engineers did for a 5-year, 10-year plan, and it's in David's office. I'll be glad to show him where it is, because I've gone through it, so.
Haley, thank you, Tony. Haley, what did you want to share that you want with the committee now that you want to make sure it was covered?
I also have reviewed that assessment, which was pretty clear, saying it didn't meet code. I've met with the fire chief, I've met with Mr. Walsh, we had tours last year, or the year before, I guess, of the science lab, and it's a priority. I mean, these students aren't doing their science labs, and that's what I'm being told, and that is critical in a world of science and, STEM, that these kids need to be having the right resources. We are a well-funded school, and I don't see why there isn't budget planning and proactive planning for this project.
Yeah, just maybe,
Yes.
I don't want the public to think we have an unsafe room.
Thank you.
We are not able to do chemistry in that lab because it does not meet the coding requirements for chemistry. And that is 100% accurate. It does not. We are able to do life science. We are able to do some physical science, but we are not able to do the chemistry part where we have to go to the chemistry room to do that. does not have the appropriate code and ventilation for chemistry. It does not.
Thank you. And have those expenses in the budget requests that you've asked for?
So I have an email, I received an email today for a meeting either Friday, Monday, or Tuesday to go over what the engineering study has to say. So I can't comment yet because the meeting hasn't happened at my level. Maybe you're probably not even aware of that email literally came out this afternoon saying for a meeting, whether it's Friday, Monday, or Tuesday, to go over what they found. And I'm hoping to get down with them to what's the cost.
Yeah.
What does it actually look at? What's the actual cost to do this?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sounds like you're all over it, so I appreciate it. Was there something else you wanted to add?
I did just want to follow up. So I was trying to remember, and I'll have to go back and get the transcript from, I believe it was Ms. Haggerty, who was either on the council or advocating at the time. And it was either a change, and it's unclear, was it the student tax stabilization reserve, or if it was the enrollment stabilization reserve. And one of those has $100,000. So I'm going to go back and rewatch that video to say, and the second warrant article talked about $50,000 that the council approved that I thought was going to go into that science reserve. And we were going to put money into that. So when we were looking at the budget and there were these comments that, well, we don't have that funding, well, we were already supposed to put $200,000+ into that budget, so it was halfway there. So.
Any other discussion on that item? David, you know what direction you're going, so. All right, I make a motion to approve the first reading of DN. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Do I just do this?
Or does anybody have any discussion on any of those four?
This is just a review, right? So
Yeah.
there's no changes to it.
Thank you.
So
So,
the motion being for all.
yeah, retract my original motion. Tony, you retract yours?
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve the first reading of DN, IIB, IKFB, and JK. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
That'd be the second.
Any discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Motion unanimous, carries. I make a motion, I'm gonna take these separate. I move to approve the first reading to rescind IJ and DA. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. I make a motion to approve the first reading to rescind IKFBB. Do I have a second?
Second it.
Any discussion?
Is that what Mr. Walsh talked about last time? The time on there, but
Graduation exercise? No,
that was the
that's-
date.
Yeah, that's okay, yeah. Good question. Any abstentions? All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. I make a motion to, I make a motion to approve the first reading to rescind ILA student assessment. Do I have a second?
Second it.
For this one, I asked for it to be brought forward for formality for tabling. I actually would like to defer this one back, and talking with Mrs. Duran, this is our intention, defer it back to the subcommittee for further review, because was originally presented to us to rescind, but that's actually a policy we have to have, so I would actually like to move that back. So I retract my motion to rescind it.
Retract the second.
Yeah, so I make a motion to send ILA student assessment back to policy. It's not called policy committee.
Professional
Special
discussion.
discussion for
Thank
me,
you.
and I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Unanimous. I move to approve the first reading to amend DJ. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, I was going to move to table that because that last time, that is a policy that needs to reference federal procurement and statutes for the funding amounts, and that was supposed to go back to policy and have it compare it with the MSMA's policies, and it never was actually, it needs to be in alignment with all current statutes.
there anything you know that it's not in alignment with? I mean, I'm just glancing at it. 50 and 150 are federal small purchasing limits, and 10 is a micro purchasing unit limit. Just, is there anything that's not in compliance with?
Well, you and I worked on this a few years ago, right? So,
Yeah, but we're only looking to change one line in F to align with disposition of IT equipment is where it started, I believe. So we're only looking to change after offering it to the town.
I thought really in our meeting, we asked Patty and she said that the lawyers had looked it over and said it was okay, but I'm not 100% sure, so I can't guarantee that's what was said, but that's what I thought.
Any discussion on,
I made a motion to table it, which I think changes the rest of those motions, if I recall correctly, for those reasons, to make sure that it's in line with.
Well, this isn't anything that's time sensitive, so we certainly could send it back. I don't believe it's time sensitive, is it?
Yeah, honestly, why would we?
What's wrong with it? Is the question.
I'm not saying there is anything wrong with it.
I can speak to why it might have ended up here.
Yep.
So policy DJ and policy, I think it was DN, conflicted with each other on what to do with the getting rid of like old technology. So I brought it to Mrs. Dern's attention. Now it's here. I'm not quite sure what goes on in the back end, what gets removed from what, but that's kind of why it's here and why it's here.
based on that change, I wouldn't send it back, but I guess I just would ask what it was that we were specifically looking to change. I have no problem sending it back.
I'm trying to find it if this is the one that we even currently had on the books, because it talked about, and as you know, I thought it was tabled, and so I wasn't there, as I usually am. It was talking about using, the school can choose their own vendors, and we were having that situation where we were allowing someone within the school who worked here to become someone who bid on projects, and I want to make sure that that's also not currently still in here. I'm not sure why you're opposed to it. It's neither here nor there,
It's
really.
neither here nor there, but we've looked at it now for 2 years, and I don't see
We
any.
haven't looked at it with a group effort and purpose of looking at and making sure everything. So why not?
I would suggest that we pass the first reading, and if there's changes, then we could bring it forth the second reading.
I make a motion.
I already have, which is second. Okay. Is there any other discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? All those opposed? Still carries. I move to approve the first reading to amend ECB, pest management in school facilities and on school grounds. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Motion carries. Next, I move to approve the first reading to amend IKB homework. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Any discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Motion carries. Next, I move to approve the first reading to amend IMDD. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. Next, I move to approve the first reading to amend JIC. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I do.
Yes.
In the formatting of it, the old format had the cross-references under each category. That's very convenient for parents. So when we do the the update, I don't have, there's nothing within it, the new policy, that I would address. I would just ask that when you get to a section like section V, weapons, in the new policy, you have to go all the way to the back of the policy to go and find the references. But if you go to the old policy, the policy that supports it is directly referenced within that paragraph,
I like it, on the yellow pages.
on the yellow page.
I also like that it had the definitions of what things were.
This draft is provided by Maine School Management, so, but you can, as long as we're not changing language, that illegally should be full out.
Yeah, I'm not saying we should change any of the terminology, but when there is a section, it has a cross-reference, that are just all bundled in the back. Because I printed it at home and
That wasn't done in our office, that was the
Yeah.
way it would have come from Maine School Management.
Yeah, so if we-
back, the need to have, need to take the time to look at which references go with.
because I think that when I, did a sampling, the references, of the new policy were the same as the references from the old policy. It's just a whole lot easier when you read the old policy that if there's a thing that you are specifically interested in, the cross-reference policy is listed right underneath it. So,
That should be enough.
yeah, so you don't have to do a research project to find the supporting policy in the back. So that isn't an amendment, it's a recommendation maybe that could be included for the second reading.
Any other discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. Next, I move to approve the first reading to amend JICIA. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I do, under exceptions, I would ask to consider the use of blanks and blank ammunition, in the sense that we've got, for like sporting events, you starter pistols for track and cross country, and then if we have any special events or ceremonies, or you have a historical group here do a reenactment, technically they're firearms. So to ensure that they're covered under our policy, so that it would read, use of blank ammunition for approved school events, example athletic events and ceremonies, to include starter pistols and
That is a valid point, which
Yeah.
Well, yeah, football.
Yep.
One question I had too is, what governs a well-trained or qualified person possessing? How does anybody know? So what do we use to gauge that?
Where are you seeing that? I'm sorry.
Under the exceptions, B. So it does not apply by a well-trained and qualified person possessing a firearm at the school operating gun range. Well, obviously we assume that, but how is that defined? Like law enforcement, that's something measurable. Who defines that they're well-trained? Because is that a staff member who feels well-trained?
Yes,
If we do,
We have a pellet range.
the color range, yeah. In fact, or GCD.
Through this card.
yeah, but it's still a firearm. It's
Dangerous, or could be.
Yeah, next week, we go through, as a lot one, we go through, I think it's like a month of training with first sergeant through all the course activities, all the safety, take a safety exam before you're allowed out on the range. And then the first day on the range is another safety briefing, a safety course. So we get well trained before we go out there, and you're not allowed to step past a certain lines until you've been given the command to step off the line.
The question would be, do we want to add law enforcement? And And then we want the language specific from Jared to see the training that the two instructors have. We can put that right in, that would make things,
Law enforcement is there on A,
that would make it easier.
and I'm not sure.
We could get their actual credential with the military vault, if that makes it easier.
I think this covers the fact that students will be using it too, though, so that's the other variable.
Those could be added in.
Those could be added in for the second, yes. And it's just minor, but under number 2, exception discharge, spelled on for firearms. But if those items could be added, Brian, could you please set the item that you had and then get the language, please, from the junior ROTC and then the next time.
Program.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
So the motion remains the same to approve the first reading. Those will be added during the second reading.
Any other discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Yeah, sorry, motion carries. Yes. Next, traffic. Yes, Deputy Board, would you like to speak to that? Or traffic? Or I can speak to, so we had a citizen reach out about concerned about the traffic here at the high school, and so Mrs. Stern, I think it was 3 days later from that complaint, had a group of individuals that had met, and I don't know, Tony, if you wanted to talk about what you guys had talked about then, or if you would, anybody want to add?
Deputy Boyd, the SRO for schools. So we did have a meeting, Mr. Reynolds was at that meeting, we discussed traffic issues at the various schools. One being the middle school, not having a crosswalk to cross in order for students to get from the middle school across the street and then down because they like to build a hawk's nest, that new store there. So there was an issue there. The town was gonna look at that. They have it in their plan to create a sidewalk, is what they said, from there all the way down through. The traffic issues as far as in front of the school, they talked about the crosswalk and trying to come up with a different solution for the crosswalk there. We talked about having different lights that maybe go up in the air instead of the ones that are mounted on the ground. So when people approach, they can see them clearly up above instead of off to the side. That was one of the discussions that we had. The town is going to look into that. They've also done the traffic studies so that they can see where the issues are. Some of the discussion came up that we have issues for people leaving the schools, whether it be in the morning or the afternoon. I think there was discussion about how we can't just put somebody down there to disrupt the flow of traffic. That can't be done. So the reality is that in the morning, I think the discussion was to have me down there. The reality is my position is better served being in the school as students are coming into school every day, as opposed to, and I don't say this disrespectfully, but it's generally parents that are leaving at that time of day in the mornings. So they need to plan ahead. Is what my suggestion was. Well, we also have a bus transportation system throughout the whole town, and Hermon, they can use those. It's their problem is getting out of the school. We discussed that, and then I think that was about it, Mr. Runner.
Yeah, just a couple things. They said the study was gonna take roughly a year, I believe, so we won't know much for a year. But the study is, but it is all paid for. And then the other thing was the state road, we couldn't have a crossing guard or anything like that either to disrupt traffic.
On the state road. So in order to divert traffic, to direct traffic on a state road, it has to be in an emergency situation or a construction situation, not just for convenience or people that exit the road.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. I know we put you on the spot, so
No, that's fine.
And Tony, remind me who was there from the town?
Town manager was there, Scott Perkins was there, Patty, Haley and I,
Okay.
and Mr. Davis was there too, I believe.
Mr. Walsh.
And Mr. Walsh, yeah, sorry.
And when was there going to be a follow-up? You said it could take up to a
It's
year.
gonna take like a year, but I mean, our best suggestion that we got is if you're pulling out of that road and you're worried about safety, I know it's a pain, but if the sun's shining in your face, take a right and go down and turn around. I hate to say go down to the churchyard or Dollar General, but it's the safest thing to do, but unfortunately, we don't have a fix.
I think Mr. Reynolds has sat down there,
I sat down there and watched the traffic.
and the most amount of cars that was backed up to exit the school at any one time was 6 cars.
Right.
So,
And everybody got out within a minute to a minute and a half, so, but that was only one day, and, you know, so you could go down there, there could be 15 cars backed up if the traffic happens.
and then at the end of the day, school ends at 2:10, by 2:23, everybody's out of the school, there's no backup on the high school drive at all. So, just saying 13 minutes to get everybody out of the school on all buses is pretty reasonable.
Very much so. Yeah.
I'll just add, I think the traffic study was going to be included by the town at no cost because of part of the program that they're part of. And it, depending on what they find, will allow us to apply for grants that would do either rumble strips in the tar to help give people warning that the crosswalk was coming up, extra lighting, and extra crosswalks.
The argument was that the lights being on the sides of the road were not enough for people to see. But if we did something maybe about the
More
crosswalks,
when the students are trying to
more
cross.
LED lights when they're crossing would be more helpful.
The other big takeaway, if I may, from that meeting, everything is going to take time. And even talking about the crosswalk with the entrance to the middle school and going across and the sidewalk from there down, Scott said we're looking, I think, at 2026, in all reality for that to happen.
That was approved in 2020.
Right, and so none of these are fast. And even when it comes to the lights, which I think we all agree, elevated lights going across Route 2, especially when we've driven down Route 2, headed east over the last 3 weeks, we know, again, the state will have to approve that. So I'm hoping from that study, which again could take up to a year, will give us that information, because that's the best solution I think we can come up with. But again, the state, it's a state road, so the state would have to, and they would have to be awfully elevated, given what comes down Route 2. So that's my hope, is that the data shows that that could happen.
Well, I appreciate that you guys all got right on this, so thank you.
Also,
Okay, thank you. I make a motion to approve the superintendent to apply for federal funds. Do I have a second?
Second.
For discussion, does anybody else want to kick it off?
Yeah, I'm wondering what it's a discussion we've had in 2 years, and it's also a discussion we've had through the town of once we approve the funds, what's the oversight? And how is that oversight managed? Because I know we talked about that 2 years ago, and then we received the federal funds. Is there a budget that's put together and followed? I mean, I know that we as a school committee, once the federal funds are approved, we then have no more visibility of that.
Well, federal funds are received, the amount is determined by the state based on a number of factors. And then they're received, and there's a separate accounting for those federal funds done out of the central office. So it doesn't require any action necessarily of that. The feds require us, your approval to even apply for title funds, those kinds of things.
What we approve to request it, is there any approval to spend it? We've had that same discussion as the warrant
Yeah,
article
it's
as
not-
town.
it's-
town.
Yeah, prior to expenditure, I guess in a way you do through the budget, the federal funds don't show up in that local budget, but you sign the warrants where the funds are expended. It's pretty directed as to what it can be used for. I would defer certainly to the people who do.
I'm responsible for applying for the title funds, and we do a comprehensive needs assessment across the district to determine what our needs are to help us set goals, and then there's a very strict budget that we have to set and then send to the state, and it needs to be approved by them. And then, and there are parameters for each one of those title funds of what we can spend, what we can't buy with them, and our purpose for all of our purposes have to be driven by that comprehensive needs assessment. And then there's something similar for the special ed department for the funds that they have.
By approving this, aren't we ultimately approving that budget?
You're approving the application.
The application.
The state requires the budget as part of the application process.
Right. The
So
state approves the budget.
The budget. You simply approve that you can apply for those funds. And then it's, like I say, it's fairly directed, but the state approves the amount that you're going to receive. So there's no negotiating that. It's the state determines that. So your action is to approve us to apply for those federal funds, which is a significant amount of money that comes in. And then the state acts as the overseer of those funds. It's who reporting that has to be done on how those funds are spent. But as they mentioned, the state determines that based on the plan that is developed by their set of guidelines that we have to, needs assessment, financial need, if you have multiple schools, those kinds of things. So it's pretty well directed. It's not a budget we sit down and say, should we spend it here or spend it there? They tell you where you can spend those dollars. But it does need your approval in order to even file an application.
When is the application due for these funds?
July 1st. Oh wait, is that right? Melissa? August 6th.
It's usually the application opens typically at the end of June, but we want your approval so that we can start the planning process. So what we typically do, like Melissa said, is we look at the needs, so that's looking at various data points and then figuring out how to best leverage those funds. Typically, the majority of our funds go to sponsor our Title I program. So it's required by state law that we have a response to intervention program. So that requires 2 tiers of interventions or supports for students. The first tier is our Tier 1 classroom intervention support. Most students receive those supports. The middle tier, if you view it as sort of like a triangle, that middle tier is for students that are struggling in the classroom, but do not qualify for special education yet. So we have to do some measures in between that referral process to make sure they don't need just a little extra attention to get them back on track. Our Title I program provides that required Tier 2 support. And so the majority of our funds that we receive from the federal government goes to support the staff in that program. So at the elementary school, it pays for 2 teachers and an ed tech, and then it pays for any supplies for that program. The remainder of the funds we receive out of the 3 other titles that we're eligible for. There are a number of different projects that we've created. So it's all based on, like Melissa said, that comprehensive needs assessment. In the past, we've provided professional development at the high school, provided some funds for staff to work on curriculum development, brought in trainers and speakers, and done some other projects, whatever comes out of that district-wide needs. And then there are, throughout the process of receiving those funds, that whole year we have to do performance reports for the state. So we have to assure them that we are using those funds the way that we have said in the application that we're using them. So that involves the finance piece, so Jamie is sending them invoices, and then we're providing them with student data too, just to say, we are seeing these types of improvements, and we're doing these types of measures that align with our application. So it's very overseen by the state, I guess. There are a lot of accountability measures. I think the reason we're probably doing this a little bit earlier than normal is we want to make sure that you approve of us starting that process. That title application process itself does require a school committee member
to at least look at and have some contribution to that too. My team met today, and we talked about how we would go about doing this. Last year it was Jessie Keith who asked to serve on the committee for the application development, but we're open to anyone sitting in on it, but it should be a board member that at least is a part of the application process.
In the past, we've tried to include board members that have students at the elementary school because the bulk of the funds are for that school, the Title I school.
So are you also seeking out, are these grants that are available that you're applying for in addition? This is like federal grants and they say these are what are available and then you guys say this is something that would benefit for our school, or you're, no?
This is the one we apply for every year.
Right, yeah, to maintain this. And you said how many staff are funded out of these usually?
2 teachers and 1 ed tech. 2 teachers.
And that's for the regular education side of it. There's also a special education side of the federal funds, that there are additional staff.
This falls under this?
2 separate.
That's a different
approval, school board approval?
Same school board approval, just a different bucket of federal funds.
But this approval does both of those?
Correct, yes.
So I might be missing something, but I'm hearing June and July is when we get the approval for the funds, but we're gonna be doing a budget before then, so what are we factoring in for the budget? We just assume that we're getting those?
We won't do a budget until we get the allocations from the federal government, which happens sometime in the spring. It's never like a short thing, but I think it's important to get the approval so we can start looking at the comprehensive needs assessment so that we can start looking at the application and what we would want. Once we find out what the funds are going to be, how we can leverage them.
Got it. 100%.
But we want to start looking at the data and start looking at what our needs would be.
It's my fault, I didn't ask my question correctly, so thank you for explaining that. Get that 100%. I'm talking about the big infamous budget, that how does these funds factor into that, is what I'm asking.
Like taking the pressure off, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, say, I haven't seen a skeleton or, a draft of a budget, but I wouldn't even know what number to throw out there, but say it's X million dollars, how are these federal funds factored into that?
They provide additional staffing that supports that budget. So if we weren't receiving those federal funds, and it's a little of a misnomer, it's not like we develop a budget and then ask the federal government for that. They tell us how much they're going to give us. We have to tell them how we're going to spend it based on the studies. So,
in your application.
So that it supports, like I said, what they've explained. At the elementary school, 2 staff members in ed tech to support our RTI, response to intervention program. So those needs would still exist, whether we were receiving federal funds or not, whether we'd be able to afford them or not.
That's what I'm concerned about, is what if these, quantify what is it in the past that we've received for federal funds?
Varies every year. It depends highly on our free reduced lunch count. And so and then the Fed set a certain rate for each student, and so it does vary each year. There's a lot of variance in the other titles. So there are 4 titles that we are eligible to receive. Title I, which is for interventions. Title II, which is for classroom supports. Title IV, it's been a while. Title IV can support enrichment. Title V is kind of a bucket of supports that encompass all of those other titles. Title III is for if we have a huge population of students that receive ELL services, English as a second language. We don't have that type of population to qualify. So we have those 4. In the past, we've always received enough funds to cover the Title I. For us and our purposes, that Title I piece has always been the most important. So if we don't have enough money to cover the cost of our salaries, we're still able to take from those other buckets and put into Title I so that we can cover the cost of intervention. Because out of all of those titles, the major theme is meeting the needs of students who are struggling. So you can move money into that title. Once we cover the cost of our program, because that is required that we have an intervention program, that Tier 2, like I talked about the pyramid, it's required that we have that in place. Once we've covered the cost of that, then we have some money that we can decide, like I said, based on those needs assessments to determine what the best use of funds would be. We usually have
around between $230,000 and $280,000 to spend, depending on the year.
Okay, so it's not millions we're talking about,
It's
it's
not.
like hundreds of
No.
thousands, okay.
And typically
was
when
kinda
we
curious.
get that, the amounts, I included it with my report last year. I will also this year that will show you what the amount was that we got last year, what we're getting for the coming year, and then what we typically use those monies for.
No, that's
So
perfect.
you'll have more information when we get more information about what the money
And
is.
we
I
always
really
make sure to
appreciate
present
this.
the goals too. So in May or June, you'll see this is what we discovered through our analysis of the data and our needs of the 3 schools. This is what we determined to be our goals for our application that we're going to send to the feds. This is how we're going to keep track of the money. These are the results that we would like to see. And so usually that goes before we officially apply. We get approval again from the school committee, so you have a chance to take a look at the work that's been done and ask any questions before we officially apply.
I appreciate the explanation, so thank you.
Say that again, is there another, we're approving this application. Once you receive it, is there another approval process?
So you're approving that we can start working on the application.
Yep.
And then in May or June, we're going to come to you and we're going to say these are the goals. We have to have the goals for our application open for public comment. And so typically we bring it to the school committee, we post it on the website, I usually put something out to families. So there is an opportunity for you to ask questions, for you to make public comment, and for us to consider the comments that have been made so that we can go back and do any revisions that might need to be done before the actual application is submitted.
And a member of the school committee would have been on your
Correct.
team for that.
Yep, and a member of the community at large too.
Any other discussion on that? Any abstentions? Thank you. All those in favor? Motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the transfer of up to 5% of the funds from one cost center to be used to balance the other cost centers? Do I have a motion, sorry, do you wanna make a motion?
I'll make a motion, yeah.
Okay, do I have a second? Motion does not, well, actually, so,
I'm gonna abstain.
yeah, you guys are abstaining, we don't have a second, so the motion does not pass. We can have discussion on it. For me, this item usually happens towards the end of the year, so I am curious, why this is coming to us now.
I believe historically, this is the meeting that we bring it forward. The adjustment is not done until after the numbers stop moving. So sometime after the summer payrolls are run is when we actually make the adjustment. I think it's just here so we don't forget about it and have it in place for if we need it. Because we don't have to do it every single year.
So the motion, did anybody have anything else?
I do have a couple, so, can you clarify your statement if we don't have to do it every single year?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Could you clarify the statement that, did you say we don't have to do it every single year, what did you mean?
Correct. So I believe we did it for 24 and 23. I don't think we had to do it in 22, 21, 20, but the vote was still there to allow us if we needed to. So if we go, so the state says we can't overexpend the bottom line of the budget. Those cost centers are set with what's in the warrant articles, but state statute allows us to reallocate up to 5% from one cost center to another if the need arises, so that the cost center itself is not overexpended. It doesn't change the bottom line of the budget. It just allows us to if there are funds available in one cost center, that we can shift to another that is over budget as a cost center, then it allows us to do that.
So, and I've read some of the statutes on this, but can we clarify why we do a blanket or ask for a blanket approval versus when they're being overexpended, it's not coming to the board for a specific approval?
I don't have an answer for that one.
What month would money have to be moved?
We move it, well, we we don't move it until the numbers stop moving, because it would be like trying to hit a moving target.
Yeah.
So we know that we have July and August payrolls that will post in June. It would be at least after those payrolls are completed.
So July, you would have
No,
one
it
on
would
here, or
probably be
August?
September, honestly. It would probably be
So-
September that we move them. So we would be moving them in, so let's take this year for an example.
Yeah.
We would, if we needed to move them, we would move them probably after August 31st, which is into FY '26, but it's for, we would be doing it in FY '25, after the expenses have all hit the books.
So when, let me ask, and it's probably me getting confused, when would you know that you needed to move the money? You're saying not until September?
We
So-
won't know the final number that we might need. Anytime a cost center goes over, like for example, the transportation line in FY '24 went over very quickly because the bus that wasn't supposed to be in until '25 came in '24. That cost center was already gonna be overexpended. So that was one of the cost center, and I did report that out, I believe in my finance report of what those numbers were.
Maybe you voted to approve that, if I recall correctly.
I don't remember if you voted to approve it, but
This is just to clean up the books. It's no different than the town council. We used to take money out of the fire department to put it into public works when we used too much salt one year. Or if the fire department needed an extra vehicle, we would take money out of the public works and transfer it to the fire department. You can't spend more than you budget for. This is just to clean your books up. And we used to do the same thing, and they would always note to us, yeah, this is what the money we got moved, yeah, okay, good.
I just was gonna make a motion to table it until a later month, that's what I was gonna do when we knew some concrete numbers.
I'll second that.
Motion tabled until June.
I,
I'm fine with it, if you don't want to table, you just did. If it's at the end.
So I do make a motion to, table it until a later month, and I just would ask when there are numbers concrete to come back to us with it. Was there a second?
Yep.
Any discussion?
The only last question, right now, currently, are you seeing anything that's might need to be moved around? Okay.
So, might not even be an issue this year. Any abstentions? All those in favor of table? All those opposed? Motion carries. Next, I move to approve the purchase of a bus for FY '26. Do I have a second?
Second.
Yeah, for discussion.
So, in order for us to get on the list for the state to support the purchase of the bus, we need to apply to be on that. So we need to send them to the board members to show you approve the purchase of the bus. So, we received notice today that we were approved for a purchase of a bus in this current budget. They're always rolling, it's a rolling target, but in my short conversation with Jason, you're running 10 buses or so with a spare or two. If you're not replacing a bus every year, you're going to fall quickly behind. And so this is a formality for the state for us to get in the process to get on the list for a bus.
So this is the '26 budget that we're talking about, right?
Right. So you're obviously in the budget process, you can change your mind.
Yep.
You can cut that bus out of the budget, but
Do
it's
we
just so that we can get on the state list, approving the purchase. So
I just don't like to approve something on the general cost, so it's I looked it up, it's about a 45-55 split. So as far as what we budgeting, we're looking at a type C or a type B
Jamie,
bus.
correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking probably close to $100,000 for a full-size bus.
they're over
It was
160.
160-ish, what we just paid.
We just talked about this in Carmel, right? They're like 140 right now,
Yeah.
roughly.
Depends on which type you get. They have a couple different types. One's a little more expensive than the other, but 140 to 160 is the range that they're in.
And it's a matter of getting on the list. You can approve it or not when the time comes, but if you're not on the list, you may need the bus. You may need a bus, but if you're not on the list,
We
you're
won't
on
get the
luck.
reimbursement through the state for it.
Did we get two though recently last year and this year? Like we got two that really close together, I think.
So one of them was behind because of COVID, the other one was supposed to be
Delivered or
out
whatever.
as well, but it came sooner than had anticipated. But like Mr. Walker was saying, we have the bus fleet that more or less is a new bus each year because one is getting retired off the fleet. Yes, thank you. They just get to the point where
It's a life cycle
it's
replacement.
a life cycle replacement, but they get to a point where they're not inspectable. And when they're not inspectable, they're not safe. And when they're not safe, we don't want our kids on them.
Sure.
So the number of buses that we have, it's more or less a bus each year. And without the approval, we can't get on the state's list, and the state does provide an approved bus purchase reimbursement through the 279.
I know Ms. Haggerty worked on this when she was on the council, so there was some conversation about buying them outright and then reimbursement and all of that. And I know you're being proactive, so when you guys are working on the budget, is that part of that equation?
It will be in, the bus itself will be part of that conversation. It will be in the budget.
The reimbursement, because we'll expend the money, but we get some of it back.
The reimbursement happens through the 279 process. So when we get our 279, that bus is part of that reimbursement if we're approved for one.
It's part of the state funds.
It's part of the state funds that we receive.
To the student.
It's separate on this, we can show you on the 279 where it is, it's separate, but it's in that total funding that you get from the state.
Any other discussion? Any abstentions? All those in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. For the February 3rd meeting, I just wanted to talk about it with the committee. Dr. Sargent is going to would like to come into town and do a meet and greet with the community from 5:30 to 6:30 before that committee meeting. And so the only thing I would ask, David, if you were able to communicate that with the town and they were able to announce that at their meeting, that would be greatly appreciated. But I just would defer to the administration on how we could get the word out so that the community could come to that if they wish. So 5:30 to 6:30. Did anybody have anything they wanted to add to that?
Would you change the location other than this, or are you still planning on doing it here, or would you do the auditorium instead?
It's a good question. I would do here. I don't know if those people would want to stay for the meeting anyway. But, Thank you, Doctor.
It's just, do we agree in the auditorium? We can work that out.
Does anybody have any other ideas for that? I just want to let the committee know, and then Julie would have to change the posting of that time. Yeah, right.
Did you want it 5:30 to 6:30, or did you want to start at 5:30? We need
Yes, yeah, I think that's February, yes, February 3rd.
Meet and greet 5:30 to 6:30, then meeting, full meeting at 6:30.
Yes, yep. Thank you. And then there's no finance meeting on the books, but I'd like to propose that there was one for January 21st. David, help me out. We will have. Oh, I'm not there yet. I'm still on item G, sorry. My bad. I know, because I was talking about finance, so you got confused.
Yes,
Yeah.
We will have a draft expenditure budget at that point to look at.
Will we see it that day? Or will we have it for him, do you think?
I'll do my best so that you have. Our plan is to get there. We're working as quickly as we can to get this. So I'll try to get it to you. I'd like to tell you that we have it to you a week in advance.
like the first one to be a regular finance meeting, because we'll also have the 2 town councilors join us for that. And then perhaps we can meet and talk about what the future looks like and when we'll have a second full school committee meeting so that everybody can ask questions. But for this first rough draft, I think it would be best just to keep it a finance meeting on the 21st. Yeah.
Mr. Murphy and Mr. Barry.
So we can work out a time on that. So that's
Yeah.
next.
we can take
Reports. Did we have anybody that wanted to add any public comment for that? Close that public comment. For the administrative reports, I'll let other people start. Did anyone have anything else?
Well, I did have a couple statements, or I didn't have it on the agenda, but I have multiple times asked about the subcommittee times and the location, and they're always changing where they are and when they are, and it's very inconsistent even for us as board members, let alone the community. And asking, I had mentioned in an email today, could we do them the week after a school board meeting so that we are getting that information fresh out of a committee meeting, and then it gives the administration and all of us time to work on whatever we've asked for before the meeting, so they're not a week out or 3 days out cramming them with, whether policies or whatever. They don't really have the time to, it gives each person a week.
I saw your email and thank you for sending it, because I agree that there's opportunities for us to be able to improve. For David, I would like him, I mean, there's many things that he's doing, of course, right? The budget's the priority, so I don't want to say change too many things right now, but if I had to focus, it would be the budget unless anyone, but I appreciate what you're saying, but I would perhaps have that be something that we work with Barb when she comes, is what I'd like to see. But I'm hearing you with what you're saying, and I thank you for your email that you sent, is what I was thinking with the administrative report, or, committee, with what you mentioned. The only thing for administrative reports that I wanted to mention was we were missing a couple this time, so thank you for getting us the curriculum one, I appreciate that. I don't see the special services one, so I just would ask that it's consistent, that we get a copy of every administrative report every time. I understand that there can be vacations, etc., but if we could just make sure that we get those, that would be great. Did anybody have anything that they wanted to add under the administrative reports? You had something?
The beginning pilot of Into Literacy.
Yep.
Is there any cost associated with that?
No, not to do the pilot.
Any other comments on those? For finance report, I don't even know where to begin on that one. That's very important topic, obviously, and so I'm really excited with the draft that you guys are going to be coming up with.
Do we have an estimate of what the July and August funding will be for the year-round contracting, so that we can contract employees, so that we can plug that into our finance report now, so that dollar value can be encumbered, or at least we know what it is, so we can work on summer salaries. I understand they're there. We're told that they're.
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we can get it.
That's awesome.
If we had that for next month, it would make life better. Because right now, when we don't have that in there, it doesn't reflect even close to our status.
It reflects the chair, we're sure what you really are, but you are committed.
Right, yeah, and was there a reason why the change in format on the, and like I said, I don't care about format, but when it changes, it catches, it is
More than willing to provide the wrong with format to anybody who runs that, but it's just, it's a little overwhelming.
Digitally.
This format shows on the far column percent remaining, which is really like at the end of December, we're 6 months through our fiscal year. So as you look down through those cost centers, something jumps out that's either way above 50 or way below 50. There's a reason, for example, if you look at the cost centers for instruction, you see they're above 50 because of the summer salaries are in there. I mean, we just haven't, we haven't taken those out. And then on the last one, the debt service, that payment is one payment, and then what's left in there is the interest, which is paid at a separate time. So it just gives you a
yeah, the percentages for regular instruction though, the summer salaries haven't already been added to those.
So that's, what's it say?
It says 66% remaining, right, okay. So they haven't been.
So they have not been for the next, because it would be for this year, so they have not been taken out of there yet. So, but we can give you that number and you know, that would be 50. That's one of those lines that usually hangs pretty close to percentage-wise where we are in our fiscal year.
No, what threw me was there was a change for the last 2 years. Instead of percent remaining, it had been.
That's a David Walker thing. I apologize.
No,
I just for me to think about percent expended, that I have to do the quick math in my head, so it's easy for me to see percent remaining.
So that was David Walker's thing, is what you're saying. That's an acceptable expectation.
One of the questions that I had was, I know that Peter Hall wasn't able to finish the audit. Do we know why he wasn't able to finish it?
He had stuff on the town side that took him longer than he anticipated. I believe he is set to come back January 16th.
Perfect.
I would have to double check that, but I think
Thank you.
that is when he's scheduled to come back.
Thank you.
Do you know what, I'm tired, which section he's auditing specifically? I know he does it overall, but then he chooses one.
But the single audit,
Yeah.
it's ESSER funds, so it's the COVID, the last of the COVID funds.
It has to be over 700,000, is that right?
Oh, not the one single fund, a municipality, including the school department, has a single audit when all federal receipts are more than 750, and then the auditor determines which federal programs he's going to audit. And this year he's doing ESSER, the ESSER fund, so it would be ESSER 2 and are what we had in FY24.
Anything for committee reports?
I have the calendar in front of me as far as our next facilities meeting, and back to the CIP part, I think the town was requesting to know what capital improvement projects, because they meet in January to discuss the capital improvement. So that's kind of where that was also stemming from, but we really didn't make any headway or direction of the facilities meeting. I'm still looking at the list from last year, which I still have in this folder, and I'm sure there's more to add to it. So I feel like in the budget process, maybe when is that decision of what we're going to work on budget-wise going to be discussed?
What was that, the timeline?
Yeah, because if we're not meeting, does the facility need to meet to decide? Is it going to be a facilities decision? Is it administrative? How is the capital improvement and budget part of that going to work?
I mean, we can certainly pull the facilities numbers out of that proposed budget for if the facilities committee wishes to meet. If there's a timeline that requires us to do that sooner.
It's not necessarily I need to meet, I just need to know who's going to do it. Who's going to look at the projects that need to be done, and because last year it was the facilities and finance committees, and you guys are on finance, so it's a kind of open discussion of.
It should be the superintendent.
Yes, that's what we.
Right, I mean.
You know, I think the sooner that, as soon as the finance committee has that initial in it, and if talking a small group of people, and we can take a look at how quickly. We had talked about perhaps operating as a full board on the budget thing, and I understand that you want to do finance first. So that, you know, I don't want Jamie to jump over the table. But
That's fine.
I'm missing something that I can't deliver, but if we're gonna try to do that before, but at some point, both those committees for that purpose, which is why I said the full board.
Yeah, it's way easier.
Because everybody's at the table as we're discussing those issues, so, but it's.
So it sounds like, just so I'm clear, that you all will work on the budget in the finance meeting on January 21st approximately, and then see what the numbers are looking like, and then we'll come together.
There will be a time when we'll come together, we've got to figure out the time, absolutely. I don't have it ready. Okay. Anything else for committee reports? Possible future agenda items, David?
All set, thank you.
Debbie?
I'm all set, thank you.
James? Tony?
All set.
Haley? We keep kind of going over increasing substitute pay, but we never actually get it on the agenda to vote about increasing the substitute pay.
Are you talking about increasing it now, or are you talking about in the budget?
I mean, it's, I hate to say it's trivial, but
It
now would be good.
well,
No?
so I think we need their pay to meet minimum wage. It needs to be updated. It does not need to be, we need to meet minimum wage this year. We really need to evaluate in the budget process what next school year is going to look like. But I do need it increased now.
February?
Today.
Oh,
I mean,
oh.
it's, we have to meet minimum wage, where it does, their rate of pay does not meet minimum wage today. Minimum wage changed on January 1st, and the amount that they have does not meet that hourly rate.
Sorry about that. I was gonna say budget, and then we need a scholarship policy. We don't have a scholarship policy about funds that are left over in student accounts when they're fundraising money, and how we could have possibly expend some of those, or what happens to that money. And just scholarships. Anything else? No.
We set as a goal that we were gonna do quarterly training for our committee, so we haven't worked out what our subjects are, so if we could have that on the February agenda to do the final, what we want for training subjects, and then do the catch-up on the first, on the second quarter, if we're going to do all of that.
I don't want to lose sight of that graduation date for 2026. Brian, thank you for getting me the numbers for winter track. Correct me if I'm wrong, it was about 20% of the junior class currently.
Correct.
So,
and it will only go up once we have our first outdoor season.
yeah, that's what I'm really curious what the outdoor numbers are gonna be like, because is it gonna stay the same or is it not? So that's really something that we've gotta keep our eye on. What would be a target date to have a decision on?
I usually sign a contract in June,
Okay.
if we plan on having it across.
So when will we know how many students are doing spring?
We'll know that in late March, early April.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have a pretty good idea. I think we're gonna have to move it, so
Yeah.
brought it up all the way, so.
Yeah, no, I
Even
appreciate
if it's
it.
only 10%, you're still talking 15 kids who seniors you put in jeopardy of choosing graduation or states.
But do they all go to states too, I wonder too, that's the
Well, if
tricky
the team
thing.
goes, they go, this is the,
Oh, that's
this
the
is the, right, this is the hard part. We haven't had a team, we have not had these numbers ever.
No, we haven't.
It's never been a problem. Now we built it, now it's, not a problem, it's just, we need to plan now before.
It was 2026. It's 2025's graduation.
2025, we cannot change, we have a contract, we
Okay.
pay a nice healthy deposit, we cannot change that. But I'm worried about next year, because those numbers, if we have 80 kids and we have 20% of them are seniors, that's a problem.
Perfect, thank you. I appreciate you bringing it to our attention super early. The only other thing that I've been getting a lot of is parent complaints, trying to come directly to the school committee, so just that complaint process, I don't think we need to change anything there, but just making sure that we're all deferring back to the starting point, because I think people like to try to skip and try to come to us and think that they can get things changed, so I defer back to where it's gonna be handled and come to us as a last resort, so.
I always assure people that we will resolve the issue.
Yeah.
I'm not dodging the issue, but
Right.
it sometimes can be resolved at a much lower level. So as a board member, it's the same thing.
Exactly.
Eventually, it's gonna land with you. If it's not resolved at my level, it comes to you. So you don't have to tell people, look, I can't hear you, whatever, but it has to come to us through that process.
100%. I will hear them all day long, but when I hear that they haven't started with the lowest common denominator and really it could be solved there, as a parent, I have to do that. So we all just have to do it.
My point there was just
Yeah.
that you're not avoiding your duties. It's
Yeah.
just that there's a process.
Absolutely, and that's what I defer people back to. So it's just we're getting a lot of that right now. So I make a motion to approve the 6 warrants listed. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those, or any abstentions, excuse me. All those in favor? Motion carries. I move to adjourn the meeting at 8:42 p.m. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries.